Hey guys, Becky here with Design Bundles, and I'm super excited to have you join me today because we have a really great project. Now this is part 2 of our tutorial. Part 1, we show you how to set up the design, and we are back to show you how to press your own no-sew fabric applique. So here we are in Silhouette Studio. Of course, if you missed part 1, this is part 2. If you missed part 1, we do have a video on setting up these designs yourself. If you're unable to locate a no-sew applique design that you like, we showed you how to create one out of an existing file, gave you some ideas what to look for, and then we also showed you this is a font that came with its own outline, so that worked out really well. What we're going to cut today is this file right here. And we are going to cut the blue design part out of heat transfer vinyl and the light blue pattern out of fabric. So the first thing I'm going to do, I did group this together, and I'm going to size it to the maximum width for my cutting mat here. It's going to be 11.5 inches wide. Now if I want to, let's see, I can actually turn it a little bit. This is going on a tote bag, so I do want to make it as large as I can because the tote bag is actually about 15 inches. So just something to keep in mind when you're sizing. All right, now I'm going to ungroup this because I'm going to be cutting this separately. So I'm going to draw the paw print out. This is what we're going to cut out of our fabric. And this is what we're going to cut out of the heat transfer vinyl. So we will flip that horizontally. Okay, we flip the heat transfer vinyl design. We do not flip the fabric. I'm going to delete the M just to avoid any confusion, but we will leave those there side by side. Now another thing that we need to do, let's go ahead and talk about this real quick. I'm going to turn on my grid. Now I just use the G on my keyboard to turn that on, but you can also access that over in your page setup panel. Your second icon is your grid. And I'm going to turn my divisions down to 1. And that will tell me, I can just count if I want to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My fabric, it really needs to be about 8 inches wide because I don't want to cut all the way up to the edges. Cutting unbonded fabric with a regular ratchet or auto blade, you really don't want it to go all the way to the edge or the top or bottom, side to side. So then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to say if I cut an 8x8 piece of fabric, then that should work. All right. So we're going to keep that in mind. We have the 8x8 fabric, and then the heat transfer vinyl needs to be at least, I would say at least a 12x12. So let's cut the heat transfer vinyl first. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select. Now I cut my glitter heat transfer vinyl on heat transfer flocked. It's just a personal decision that works better for me. And then I will go over to my Cameo and cut this out, and then we will come back and cut our fabric. All right, so we have cut our heat transfer vinyl. So let's move this out of the way, put our paw on here. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to draw a box. Now this isn't necessary. This is me probably being overly cautious, but I'm going to draw a box the size of my fabric, and I'm going to center it with my paw design here. And I just use that little shortcut here. And then let's group those together, and let's check out our align panel over here. I'm going to align it to the left and align it to the top. Now the reason that I did that is it helps me to center my design. I'm going to ungroup and then I can delete the box because I don't actually want that to cut. But it helped me now when I cut my 8x8 piece of fabric and heat and bond, it's going to help me know that this is going to cut directly in the center. So click over to the Send panel, and for your setting, I'm going to use Fabric Thick Canvas. Now that's because this is a bonded fabric, and which is why we can cut it with a regular blade. You do not need a fabric blade, you do not need a rotary blade. This is just a regular blade craft. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to use a ratchet blade. And it'll tell you you need a blade of 5, the force is 33 all the way, and then a speed of 5, which is fine. Unless you're cutting something like a delicate type fabric, these settings should work. I'm just using a regular, should be 100% cotton fabric. So let's head on over to the workstation, and I will be able to show you how I'm setting this up to put on my mat and to cut. All right, guys, so let me go ahead and give you the rundown of what we have here. This is our fabric, and this is the star of our show. It is called Terra Magic. It is a fabric stabilizer. Now, I've used Terra Magic for a long time, and I really like it. It stiffens up the fabric at the fiber level. Does that make any sense? At the thread level. And that helps us to get a really good cut. Now, I've heard that you can also use starch, that you can starch your fabric and achieve similar results. But, you know, this is just what I use. So I actually buy it by the gallon. So I usually rebottle it in pieces when I'm ready to use. So this is what you'll see me spraying it with. But this is usually the bottle that you will look for. I think it's sold on Amazon. It's sold a lot in sewing stores. Okay, so you may not find it in your general stores like Joann's or Michael's or Hobby Lobby, but sometimes your sewing and fabric stores will have that. And then we're also going to pair it up with some heat and bond, which is where when you're here referred to as bonded or unbonded fabric, this is the product, maybe not this exact brand. There are several different brands that achieve similar results, but this is the heat and bond ultra hold, and applying this to your fabric is where we start talking about bonded fabric. That'll be important when we start talking about what tools to use to cut your fabric. But we also have some heat transfer vinyl. This is glitter heat transfer vinyl because it's thicker. And this is what we're gonna use to seal the edges of our design. And then we have a tote bag, which is just the basis of the design of the project that we're using today. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and spray my fabric. And I really want this to be sprayed. I want it to be saturated. That's why I have the piece of butcher paper underneath. Now, a lot of times I will do this in my sink or on a piece of plastic just to make sure, but you want it to be saturated enough that it's gonna do its job. So a lot of times I'll give the front a good spray and then I'll turn around and spray the back too. Now, I'm using a pretty large area here for my fabric, but just know that you really only need to apply this. You can cut down the size of the fabric that you're gonna use and apply it to that. You don't necessarily have to saturate your entire piece of fabric, but I have more than one project in mind, so I'm gonna go ahead and take care of mine, and then I'll be able to store the rest of the fabric for my other project. Okay, so how do you know when you have enough Terra Magic applied? Well, I really like that for, it seems like the most of the fabric that I use, once I turn it over to spray the back, you can really start to see the design of the fabric come through. So that's a big indicator for me. I don't want this to be dripping wet, but you do want to be able to feel that it's nice and damp. Okay, it's okay to give it a squeeze, make sure that it's saturated in all parts. It's kind of like a paper towel. Once you get a little bit of it wet, you can kind of transfer it over to other areas. I hope that makes sense. But now I'm just gonna lay this out to dry. If you get impatient, you can actually throw this in your home dryer or use a blow dryer. But you can also just lay it over really just a safe area where it's not going to be disturbed, but also the area that you're using will not be affected by the Terra Magic, because it does, I don't want to say it's sticky, but like I'll have to go wash my hands after handling the fabric just because it does leave a little bit of a residue, okay? But I'm going to go ahead and dry it, and then I will come back and show you how to apply the heat and bond and also how to cut this with your machine. All right, guys, so this is my fabric. You can see it is definitely a lot stiffer, and you can still see the wrinkles. So we are going to press it out before we cut it. But for right now, what I want to do, and this will, I think, also reinforce to you that this is going to cut well in your machine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this with a paper trimmer, and I'm going to cut that 8x8 fabric square that we were talking about. So I'm just gonna slide it through my paper trimmer. And you can get paper trimmers just about anywhere. I know that you can get them at craft stores and Walmart. Just try to get it reasonably straight, and then you can save the rest of this for your next craft. Okay, so set that to the side. Now I'm going to do the same thing with my heat and bond. The heat and bond actually comes in a fairly large, well, for me, it's fairly large because you really only need a small portion of it at a time, because I typically use these fabric designs as accent pieces. But it is kind of difficult to fold it back once you unfold it. So I would just unfold the part that you need And we're not going to use the paper trimmer for this because the sheet is too big. Okay, so this is the textured inside piece of the heat and bond. And what I want to do is line up my design, my piece of fabric, and I'm going to cut just a tad bit smaller. Now, how do I do that? What I do is I pay attention to the edge over here and just make sure that the tiniest bit of fabric lays off the edge. Okay, and then I will do the same. I will realign this to the center and then make sure just the tiniest bit comes off the edge. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because if you end up with a piece of heat and bond that is larger than your fabric, when you heat it up, what will happen is the adhesive on the heat and bond will stick to whatever you're pressing it on. Now, it's not like a fatal error or anything like that. It's just, it's more inconvenient than anything. So let's move this off to the side. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and line this up. And I'm going to use my Easy Press to press it on. Now, I do try to make sure that I'm pressing it with the paper side up instead of the fabric side up. That way, if any of that glue is exposed, it will just be on my butcher paper that I have here. So I do recommend when you're doing this part here, make sure you have butcher paper or copy paper or something underneath if you're using a regular heat press. You can also perform this part with an iron if you don't want to use your heat press for it. Okay, but that also smooths out our wrinkles here and gives us like a little pre-press to make sure that there's no excess moisture in the fabric. Now, the mat I'm going to use today, I am using a Cricut mat because this is the stickiest mat that I currently have. But be careful when you're doing that because especially when we have lined this up fairly well in our software, you want to make sure that it's going to line up properly and you don't end up with parts of your design cutting outside of your fabric. Also, if that worries you a lot, you can actually secure the outside edges with painter's tape or masking tape. But I'm going to slide this right into my machine. I'm going to check my blade, make sure it's on the correct setting. Remember that was a setting of 5. If you are using a auto blade, that will automatically adjust for you. I'm using a ratchet blade, so I do that manually. But I'm going to walk over and hit send on the software. Now, before you unload your mat, go ahead and peel up a corner and check and make sure you see how good and clean our cut is. That is what you're looking for. So I can unload my mat. Now, in theory, if I wanted to save this, I could. I do have small pieces that I could use for small accents. Because I don't usually use small pieces, I like my designs to be larger. I'm not going to do that today, but let's go ahead and leave this intact here and weed out our heat transfer vinyl. Now, this should be really easy because our design is nice and thick. So I shouldn't even need any weeding tools because you can just peel up one corner and get started. But if weeding tools are in your comfort zone, that's fine. As a matter of fact, these pieces, if you have anything that you can put them on, you can actually peel them off and reassemble them for a separate project. So just something to keep in mind. I do try to be frugal where I can. And I mean, who doesn't need a good paw print accessory, right? Okay, so the way that this is going to work, if you haven't guessed already, the paw print is going to fit inside just like we showed in the software. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel these pieces off, but I'm going to put them in an area that I know for a fact what order they go in. All right, we don't want to get hasty and then forget which dot goes in which place. While I'm doing that, I'm also going to peel off the paper backing of our heat and bond. All right, so let's take our tote bag, our super cute tote bag, soon to be super cute tote bag. We need to iron this bad boy out. Now this is just a cotton tote bag, nothing special about it. I'll lay down my Teflon sheet just to protect it and give it a good press. Now my easy press is at 320 degrees. Now the way that I like to do this, if you were working with a solid piece of fabric, I'm not gonna lie, this would be a lot easier. But I wanted to show you guys that this is absolutely possible when you have multiple piece designs like this, okay? So I'm gonna line this up. Now remember, it looks crooked to the eye, but this is the design. Remember, we straightened it out to get a bigger cut area. And then I'm going to take my pieces, usually from top to bottom, and I'm gonna slide them in by hand. And sometimes I'll use some tweezers if I need to, and just start lining them up with the design. Now it's just really important to make sure that you put them in the areas that they belong with none of the background exposed. You want to make sure that you really get the edges of your heat transfer vinyl all the way around the fabric here. And I'm just using my hand to hold it in place as I place these individual pieces. Okay, so just double check, just do an inspection all the way around all your fabric. Make sure that none of the navy blue is showing through. And as long as it's not, I think we're good. We're going to cover this back up and start our pressing process. Now, like I said, this is at 320. I'm actually gonna go ahead and press that paw print first, but because my easy press is only 9 by 9, you'll see me do 3 separate presses. Now, just like with regular heat transfer vinyl designs, you should just be able to peel up the corner and reveal your design. So, cute, right? It turned out really, really good. I really love the accent that the fabric adds. So I'm very happy that we decided to turn this into a no-sew applique design. And like I said, guys, this really opens up your pattern availability to be able to use all these gorgeous pattern fabrics that you have and use them with your vinyl cutting abilities. So guys, how did you feel about our tote bag? Now, obviously, I really like it. I love any time that I can find an excuse to use fabric, just because, like I said, I'm not even a fabric crafter, but I always have to just score the cutest fabric because I just know there's something I can do with it, right? So now you know how to combine your fabric crafting with your vinyl crafting to make these no-sew applique designs. So if you have any questions or comments, please make sure you leave those down below. I love hearing from you guys, and I do appreciate you taking the time to support the channel. So if you don't mind, give us a quick subscribe, share with a crafty friend, maybe give it a thumbs up if you learned something new. And guys, I just really appreciate it. I'm going to wrap it up for today, but we'll see you again next time.